DSWP Disciple checking in. Might as well take advantage of this very beautiful sky. I'm not sure what color to describe it as. Some hue of like, I don't know, purple, magenta, gray. But anyway, I got to the gym early. Listening to my Reasonable Doubt Jay-Z regrets. So I can, just drive a little bit and be with my thoughts. Maybe I should close the sunroof. Sorry about the last video that I had that, I don't know what that was. It sounded almost like something was dragging, but it was like rhythmic and it was like on beat. My guess is that it was like some type of feedback from my earpods, but it's strange. I had nothing on me. I was just walking free as a bird. But in any event, yeah, so I just privated that. I'll kind of recap some of the things I spoke about. And then, I don't know, I guess a little like musing about life. An event that just happened to a friend of mine. I just found out. Today's her birthday, actually. So, yeah, quick update about law school. So, it's all a wrap. I'll be basically taking at least a year off. I hope it's not longer than a year, but the idea is to make the next year productive. So I interviewed with actually an old friend of mine. I probably didn't really need to interview with him because he's a buddy of mine that I've known for like 20 years. I actually went to my same school, Western New England Law, like more than 20 years ago, because I met him as an attorney probably the better part of 25 years ago, like 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. And I'm going to try to intern at his kind of like all service, private injury or personal injury rather, bankruptcy, real estate type attorney. I guess he does like a little bit of everything. And he said he just has to figure out something creative for me to do there, because it's not like he has like a position open. I just kind of went to him and I was like, you got something for me that I can put on my resume? And he's like, yeah, I'll pay you too. And I was like, it's nothing like what you make. He thinks I make the big bucks at my company working in finance, because like it sounds like an important position as a trainer on retirement software. But I mean, I can't complain too much, but it's definitely not the big bucks. But he's like, he'll pay me something. I wasn't even going to him for that. I would have honestly have done it for free, but he said he'll pay me, so cool, I'll take it. I can certainly use a third stream of income. So that kind of takes care of that, because that's one leg of things. I got a hedge in case I'm not able to get back into Western New England in a year, because usually there's no on paper moratorium, but from what I understand, usually it's like 2 years. So it used to be by the ABA, American Bar Association rather, that you had to, if you were, academically dismissed, you had to wait 2 years regardless at whatever school. Now some schools like UConn, have upheld that where it's 2 years, but a lot of them they do a year, and some do none at all, where you can just get right in. But of course, wink, wink, asterisk. So obviously your grades aren't going to be like fantastic if you were academically dismissed. Even though in my case I missed it by 0.04 of a point, so 0.04. Yeah, so 0.04 of a point. But then I'm also so far removed from undergrad that like my undergrad grades don't really matter. So it just pretty much comes down to my LSAT, which I got a 154, which is like all right, it's above the meridian, but to get into like say like a UConn, you would need like a 160 at least. Any like tier 1, tier 2 school, you would need at least a 160. So I'm gonna probably retake the LSAT probably like in January. I think usually February is off, so either January or March, more than likely. So that's my plan. Between that and then also, I'll get a recommendation letter from, the attorney's office that I'm going to be working at, or wherever it would be, along with that experience over the next year. And that should be enough to put me over the top. And if, I don't get back into my school that I was at, I should be able to get in somewhere else. That's the plan. That's usually how it works. And I already have a recommendation letter from my tour professor from my 1L year. And that's already captured in LSAC, which is like the Law School Admission Council. That's like the main hub that you go to if you're applying to law school. So they'll disseminate it anywhere that I apply to. So I won't say halfway there, but maybe 25% of the way there. So at this point, I just got to run the clock for the next year, and hopefully it isn't like a 2-year wait. The other leg of this is like, wherever I go, will they keep my my 1L credits? You know, I didn't get any quote unquote bad grades. They just weren't great. I got nothing below a C. I didn't even get a C- or a D or anything like that, or a D+. C was the lowest grade. The problem is that they were all bunched in between, you know, a B and a C, which somehow I found the margin and got, you know, a 2.26 instead of the requisite 2.3. So anyway, you know, as I like to say, in all things, give thanks. That's what it is. The next year, obviously, that will be very costly. September, I'll be 46, so I could ill afford to lose a year at this point of life. But you know, it is what it is. You just got to roll with it. So, what was the other thing that I went over in my in the first vid? I leave so much on the cutting room floor, and I didn't like re-listen to it. It was like a 20-minute vid, so I know it was more than just that. But anyway, I'll kind of like cut to the chase. The good thing with these is that it's like a living document, right? I can always just add to it in the next video once I remember. So something really important happened. So sometimes you can't judge a book by its cover, and you can't necessarily think that people have, you know, enmity towards you. So a pretty good friend of mine since undergrad, you know, so since '97, her birthday is today. And she hadn't talked to me and a few people in like the last year. So as you know, this has been a wacky few years. You know, I lost my ex, you know, the love of my life. I lost my best friend. Of like at this point, it's been close to 2.5 years since he spoke to me, really, other than a very cryptic message last year, August. And that was like my best friend of like what would have been 31 years now. I lost another friend, you know, the one that I visited when I went out to LA, you know, California, back in like the end of 2021. Even he, at this point, I've known probably the better part of like 10 years or so. Obviously not just a casual friend if I would go out to California to go see him. And actually, let me swing by Barnes & Noble because the Overstreet comic book price guide might be out right now. We're basically in August. I love a good bookstore, even like the small hole in the wall ones, but I do like Barnes & Noble a lot. Barnes & Noble, if you've ever seen that fairly famous skit on Instagram at this point. Yeah, she hadn't talked to anyone. I thought, you know, people get weird and they just stop talking to people for no reason. So anyway, you know, today was her birthday, so you know me. I mean, you remember T from 2012. I literally sent her a happy birthday every year. She had stopped talking to me since like 2013, like Christmas of 2013. And, you know, she just turned 40 last year, October. I kept, you know, wasn't trying to like hound or anything like that. And, you know, she has like an iPhone, or at least I thought she did. And it went from like green to blue, green to blue. You know, this is like over like 11, 12 years. And then finally last year she responded. And, you know, we're kind of like fast friends again. It's still weird, obviously, but, you know, we still talk, and I'm fine with that. So, you know, everyone has their reasons. I'll leave that kind of off the record. There's reasons for why she hadn't spoken to me. It didn't really have anything to do with me, as it turned out. And that's kind of what this video is about. So anyway, I hadn't talked to my friend from, you know, undergrad since May of last year. I checked the text, but then I texted her and, you know, happy birthday, you know, Jay, we'll just call her. And then she responded pretty quickly. Thanks, exclamation point with a smiley face. And then I didn't expect to receive a response because I hadn't heard from her since, you know, like, I don't know, like May of last year or so. Actually, no, it was her birthday last year, so July of last year, which makes it even weirder. So then, you know, we kind of get into a brief conversation, not much back and forth. I'm like, so what's up? I haven't heard from you in a year. I hope you're all right, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're trying not to push too much because you don't want to scare her off. And then she starts typing, but then I notice you can see the bubbles, right? So even though she has an Android, you know that like in the last year or two, Androids now have basically iMessage. It's not iMessage, but like you can see if they're texting you or not. And then finally it comes through like maybe better part of like 10 minutes later or whatever. And that's important because there's a reason for that. So then she just, she says like, hi again, which makes no sense because she kind of already said hi with the thanks, exclamation point, smiley face. So then I'm like, all right, that's weird. And then maybe sometime after, she sends me a short video and I listen to the video, and then it doesn't say much. It's fairly incoherent, but she looks the same. Like, she looks as I remember her. But I'm like, wait a minute. Did you have like a health scare or something like that? And then no response. And then later today, there's a response like, hi, this is her friend R. I don't really know her, but I've heard her mention her name before in passing. And she was like, yeah, she had a stroke last year, March, which is weird because I guess I have to look back at the text. Sometimes you think you've been speaking to someone regularly and maybe you really haven't. So, March to July of last year, certainly we spoke last year, July, on her birthday. And then I tried messaging her after and then no response, and I just kind of like let it go. And I could see that she was like liking my IG and Facebook posts, but then not responding to me. And then another close friend of mine, he was like, yeah, what gives? I tried to hit her up. Usually she's pretty good about reaching out to people. I've heard nothing from her, And then, so then I get into it talking to a friend who clearly has her cell phone, essentially functioning kind of like his caregiver is what I'm gathering from this, and kind of like visits her from time to time and I guess sends out messages on her behalf, whatever. And she said like, yeah, last March she had a stroke and she's recovering. And I'm like, oh, all right. So obviously this makes a lot of sense. Timeline's a little weird since we spoke last year, July, but she said it was March of last year. And then she gets into like the logistics of it. Like, I guess she had a stroke and was just home by herself, laying on the floor for like 3 days before anybody got to her, which is crazy because she's in Hartford. Obviously, she must have been debilitated and far enough away from her phone where she couldn't reach. Because I'm just 25 minutes north of her. I would have just come down there and got her to the hospital or whatever, or got an ambulance to her. I'm probably, when I stop and think about it, because like her best friend, as far as I know, now, obviously this lady R is close to her. I don't really know her, but in terms of like her friends that I do know, she has another friend that we went to school with, but she lives in Rhode Island, obviously, so that's like not close enough, probably like a good hour and a half away or whatever at closest. So realistically, I probably would be on the short list of people that could get to her quickly and that she would trust enough to reach out to, but she didn't, so I didn't know. It's not like I didn't reach out to her, but she didn't respond. But, now it makes sense. She probably couldn't text for herself. And when she was in the company of other people, I was probably the furthest thing from her mind in terms of like, let me get back to Disciple and let him know that whatever happened. But she, to her credit, she did, like my post. And so she was there. It's like I could see her virtually, but like, she wasn't there. So it just, and I didn't mean to bring up T, from 2012. A lot of you who subscribe to me, like all 2 of you, I joke. I've got like 390 something, which is like obviously like a very small channel, but I'm grateful for all of you. A lot of you, probably a good 200 something of you that do follow are probably back from those days with the T saga. I won't rehash that. And once I got back into contact with her on her birthday, she finally responded because it was her 40th. I was like, happy milestone, and we've kind of bantered, I'd say weekly since then, since last October, which is crazy. We're, October is only 3 months away, so it's been almost a year in a sense, 9 months. A lot of times it has nothing to do with you, right? Obviously I can't speak on T, but with this situation, a lot of times it's not really about you, even though, it brings my mind to things about, my ex, my immediate ex. Obviously, in a lot of ways, she just, the long and short of it, right? So I work on financial plans with reps, and then a lot of these plans, they fail. And then we try to trim them and cut cost here, get some gains in the market there, get a better return on the sale of the house there, and then try to all these cobble together to get a better result so their money can last, 25, 30 years of retirement. Or maybe you can retire a little bit later, because retiring later is effectively a cut in cost. It's kind of like a subtext with Congress right now, right? Where they're trying to have the retirement age later, ostensibly shortening, entitlements and obligations for Social Security, Medicare, things like that. It's a cut, retiring later. And I always tell them, the long and short of it, I can give you the long form as to why this plan is not working out and your money's not lasting during retirement. But the short of it is you're just spending too much in retirement, right? So it's the same as a girl that leaves you, right? Even though ostensibly you didn't do anything, you did everything you thought as well as you could, right? We're not perfect. I made my mistakes, but there was none of the boilerplate time-honored mistakes that like someone will be justified in leaving for, right? Whether it's like cheating or abuse or neglect or being unindustrious, like, you know, not holding down a job for a protracted period of time, or any number of things that are like just kind of like deal breakers, right? Like wrong religion, hell, wrong politics. But the long and short of it is, you know, she just wanted a better man is what it amounts to, right? I could say the same thing about T from 2012 and a bunch of my other exes, right? So, which can be like a hard pill to swallow. But whatever, that's not what this is about. But, you know, I felt awful for her. Can you imagine just laying on the floor for 3 days? I'm actually surprised that her mom didn't come and check her, because she's with her mom right now. I don't know, even though we're pretty close friends, I don't know all the dynamics of her and her mom. You know, we all have kind of like weird relationships with our parents, a lot of us, unless you're of the lucky few. Me, for better or worse, you know, I live downstairs. I have downstairs to myself, but my mom and aunt, you know, my nosy mom, I leave the doors open, so she comes down daily. Now, there are days where I don't even see her because I'll just be holed up in my room, where I'm just kind of in and out, and I just don't see her because, like, I'm not there when she's there. But I think there's a certain comfort in knowing, you know, that as much as my mom annoys me a lot, that, you know, we're in close proximity to each other, even if we don't physically see each other. And yeah, I just, you know, I felt awful for her. Obviously, in a sense, kind of like relieved. I'm like, all right, so I didn't put my foot in my mouth or say or do anything stupid or whatever, but like, you know, selfishly. But of course, one of the first things I texted her friend, who was texting on behalf of her, I was like, you know, if she needs anything, come get me. I work at home. I can come if there's an emergency. I can come get you or whatever. Which is, you know, she knows how I am, so that was always on the table. But yeah, man, it's a crazy life. All right, so before Barnes and Noble closes, it's already 8:54. My clock's like 2 minutes fast, so 8:52. Let me run in and go see if I can maybe grab a car magazine, or certainly the Overstreet Price Guide if it is out. Anyway, the Lord is faithful. If this, you know, this story couldn't attest to that. Yeah, stay with me. God bless.